What wedding moment made you think, they are not going to last long? Groom got into a fist fight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context: groom and bride's dad. Actually, most people in these families, if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. When the maid of honor professed her love for my brother during her toast at my brother's wedding, and her husband walked up to the head table, picked her up and carried her away before she could embarrass him further. They lasted about 3 months after that. My brother and his wife, on the other hand, are still happily married 20 years later. The groom took the stupid cake thing to an extreme. The bride had given him his bite, and mushed a little on his chin or nose. He then took a piece and mashed it into her face so hard that I was expecting her to end up with a bloody nose. Cake and frosting got up her nose, in her eyes, down the front of her dress, etc. The bride had to go get cleaned up, had her makeup redone, and was ugly crying within an hour of saying, "I do." He didn't give a fuck. His third wedding. Same venue and same after ceremony driving away vehicle as the first two. I was at the wedding of one of my mom's oldest friends, and she clearly had more fun dancing with the best man after the wedding. Long story short, they dated for a while after the divorce. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over. Sight. When the groom started off his speech by saying, "We all know I didn't want to get married, but we're here for we had together 1 year, 3 months later they were finished." The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. Had an old boss who was divorced. He told me once, I should have known it wasn't going to last when the only happy moment I had on my wedding day was when I snuck out to smoke weed with my buddies in the parking lot. 2 friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guy started laughing at the part about being faithful. Oops. When they disappeared for half an hour during the reception. They were both saving themselves for marriage, and were desperate to bone down, which is a fine thing to want. But it turns out that was more or less the main reason they got married. They made it almost a year. The bride told her bridesmaids that she didn't actually want to get married. Multiple times. No one told the groom until after the divorce. I was kindly included in a last-minute +1 to the wedding of a family friend who I'd never met before. At the rehearsal dinner, or the German equivalent, the Polterbend, the guests smashed ceramic and porcelain items on the ground. I was fresh in Germany, so this was all pretty out of context and frightening, but my boyfriend explained that it's a tradition, reminding the couple that life is sometimes difficult and you have to work together to clean it up. The bride kind of half-heartedly motioned to the groom to sweep it up. He did a little bit, then just moved on to talk to his friends, leaving most of the shards strewn around the yard. Additionally, I don't think I saw the couple talk to each other once over the next 3 days of celebrations. It was a gorgeous wedding, and I'm so grateful that I was invited. Really good way to begin living in a new country. But it wasn't surprising to hear that they divorced a few years later. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony, in the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They are divorced now. When he smashed the cake in her face and hair, then went off drinking with his buddies. In 12 weeks she filed. Good thing I didn't buy an expensive gift. He complained she was mean to him throughout their dating life. The day before the wedding, all of the groomsmen and the groom's friends told him not to marry the girl. Like straight up. They lasted less than a year. The part of the vows where you pledge monogamy, the audience laughed. The most beautiful wedding I've been to ended in divorce. Venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. They got secretly married at the local town hall out of spite to the girl's father, who did not agree with the relationship. This happened right out of high school, and they divorced during my sophomore year at college. Showed up to the wedding of a friend of my husband's who I knew casually. When we arrived at the church, the groom was very drunk in the parking lot, and getting drunker by the minute. I thought it was kinda nuts since it was a full Catholic ceremony which involved lots of kneeling and standing. I honestly have no idea how he made it thought that, but he did. At the reception, he proceeded to continue the drinking party, while his new wife cried in the washroom. When it was time for the first dance, he kind of stumbled around the dance floor despite a year of dance lessons. When it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors, he instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear, in front of many elderly family members. People were shocked and talking, and all in all it was a shit show. I gave this marriage a year or 2 tops. They, however, are still married 25+ years later. I was maid of honor. Me, best man, and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. Bride excused herself to go to the bathroom and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking, as if she's passionate about, to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together, and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her but at her behind her back. They lasted 7 months. The bride and groom did the first dance, then spent the rest of their reception completely apart from each other, getting shit-faced with their own separate friend groups. The only other dancing all night was the bride dancing with her high school friends, the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance, during which the groom was crying. The best man's speech didn't mention the bride at all and basically boiled down to groom. You're married now but our bond is older and stronger. All of our hunting and fishing trips together are the best thing in our lives. Can't wait for more. Such a sad, desperate atmosphere. They made it a little over 1 year. My husband was the best man at a wedding. The bride was a nightmare. Not just during the wedding but in general everyday life. All of the friends hated her, and she had no friends of her own. We knew it was doomed when, during the portraits, the bride was making everyone miserable as can be. The groom said exact words, "I'll just send her to therapy, and if that doesn't work we can just get divorced." And #X200B. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip, and when I was leaving I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months I believe. One of my friends got married. Afterwards she looked at me crying and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students. Many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me babe. Like the previous time you called me." Other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally fucked up 20-year-olds, or one big piece of performance art. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes she'd summoned the photographer back shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. I was the maid of honor. They seemed like the perfect couple, together for nearly 10 years and had this big, expensive, beautiful wedding. Bride would have been happy with a small event but told me groom had a big family and had insisted. Alarm bells hit when I sat with her parents in the front row and realized the groom to bride ratio was so massively off. The groom had 3 best men, as well as ushers, etc. His sister and one best man read something during the ceremony, and then all 3 said long speeches about him at dinner. It was all about him. The photographer was even his friend's mom, so she kept whisking away the boys for these hilarious lad shoots. The bride was ignored most of the day, and in the evening he got too drunk, spilt a drink over her wedding gown and danced with his friends. It felt more like a big birthday party than a joint event. I'd never seen that side to him, but I felt so sorry for my friend. It was like she was just there to be a prop to his plans and look good. 3 months after the wedding he began being emotionally abusive. A month after that he admitted he'd been having an affair for years, then left. If I hadn't seen the way he behaved at the wedding, I never would have guessed he had that in him. I think she learnt never to be a backseat passenger in a relationship again. Honestly, the way she handled the whole thing, with such grace and determination, makes me so proud to be her friend. She basically told him when he left that he would never see her, or hear from her, or about her again. She dropped all friends that had a connection with him after he left, and made sure he would always live his life wondering if he made the right decision and what she was up to. I really hope his dying thought is about her. And I know for a fact hers won't be about him. She'll find real love. My best friend's wedding is tomorrow, and I told her about how I've heard several wedding photographers/videographers say that shoving cake in the face is almost a for sure factor that they're going to divorce. She told me, "Oh yeah, I told him not to, but he probably will anyway, so we'll see how this goes." Update. She put the cake in his mouth respectfully, but he booped her nose 2 or 3 times, which wasn't huge, and they just laughed it off. I cried a couple times during this wedding because their love does seem very genuine. So sorry if this wasn't the update you were hoping for, LOL, but I'll give a 1-year update. When they got married illegally in high school, 2 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. I'm a wedding photographer and I have a few of these. When a very young, Not dating long couples say things like the partner is perfect, and we never fight. When there's name calling, I particularly cringed at. It's because we so get each other, and are so comfortable that he can call me dumb slut as a nickname. They didn't last the year. One where the wedding was all about the groom promoting his band. He even sang his bride a song that was literally just him showing off his vocal range with some classic piece. She stood up and joined him on stage halfway through, and he looked annoyed that he had to share the limelight. They lasted about 2 years. He was sleeping with the other vocalist in the band. At my wedding, she paused for a long second before saying yes. The woman marrying us was like, oh, she's thinking about it. She laughed it off and said yes. We lasted 3, almost 4 years married. They were both so drunk they were slurring during the vow exchange. This was my sister's best friend, and it was a bachelorette party moment. Bride had been having an affair, everyone knew it. The groom's friends tried to tell him, but she convinced him they were making it up. I mean, at that point it was just sad. She actually had the balls to force fiancé to apologize to the guy she was sleeping with for the accusations. The night of the bachelorette party, she actually took all her bridesmaids back to the other guy's house and spent the night with him. He came to their wedding. It was so awkward. Everyone knew and everyone was talking. The groom was told but chose to overlook it. After the wedding, she insisted the other guy come on vacations with her and her husband and included him in all their social functions. Now, if they're non-monogamous, whatever, go crazy. But her husband was an absolute wreck about it for years, and she just kept gaslighting him. No one could convince him to leave her. She told my sister that a fair guy insisted he would never marry her and didn't want kids, so she was using fiancé to get them. They ended up divorcing 2 years later after their second child was born. She immediately moved in with a fair guy, and they did end up getting married. When he raised his eyebrows and gave her a knowing look during the for richer or for poorer portion of their vows. For context, he was a newly drafted pro athlete and she was a big fan of his signing bonus. YTF am I reading this the morning of my wedding? It went great, other than me losing my ring during pictures. Thank you all for the well wishes, it means a lot to us both. Lots of love for everyone. When the groom ran up and punched the bride during the reception in some kind of drunken melee. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. Bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, etc. Note I said extra, it was already decorated by the venue. She just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sends my ML groom's mom an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she bought, $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mom's side. She had a panic attack while getting ready that he wouldn't show up, while implying he didn't actually want to be married again, but they were too far into it for him to back out. They were both barely 21, and it was his second marriage. Did I mention they got engaged 6 weeks after they met? And they only waited that long because his divorce wasn't final. She was relieved when he did show and only had a few shots to build up his courage to be there. He was shit-faced by 11 a.m. They separated a year later, but she somehow ended up pregnant around the same time. They got back together for the baby, and then divorced when the baby was 2. Within a month of separating, she and their kid was living with a new guy that she had known for 3 weeks. ETA. Please don't share elsewhere, etc., etc. He ended up at the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He went out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight. She left the house and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. Portuguese wedding. Fist fight broke out at the head table during the reception between 2 groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. Groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. Surprised it took that long. Midnight buffet was amazing though. When my cousin and her husband said, I semi-promise in their vows. As in, I semi-promise to love and honor blah blah blah. I have no idea WTF it was supposed to mean, but I guess it sounds better than, I'll try, but if it's too hard, fuck it, I'm out. Weird twist. They've been married 30 plus years now. High school friend of mine married a 26-year-old Marine who she had been dating for a year. Any situation where a 25-plus-year-old person is waiting on someone to turn 18 to get married is not going to end well. Immo. When we had to pay $35 for the paperwork to be filed, courthouse wedding, and he spent the rest of the day complaining about the waste of money. Where to start? The best man was the groom's coke dealer who dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on coke and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us every time he saw us, the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding, whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more, and tell us don't smoke weed. If she, his wife, won't let me smoke weed in the house, then you guys can't. Every time we grouped. After the wedding, my friend's new wife, who was fairly quiet in public, Was screaming at my friend's family telling them it was the last time they would be seeing them and how terrible they were. It was hard to watch. 2 years later my friend walked in on her and a dude. That was that. The couple got married 2 months out of high school after dating for only a year. The whole wedding was the moment. At my aunt's wedding. Pastor. Repeat after me. For richer and for poorer. The bride. For richer and for richer. Yeah, they didn't last long. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to breakdance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery he cannot turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's fucking insane. A fun light-hearted dance with the groom followed by a close and slow dance with her male best friend. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. She told me 2 days before that she found her fiancé annoying, and that she didn't like him and that he was awful in bed. She was visibly, endlessly uncomfortable at the rehearsal wedding/dinner combo. Then she sobbed the entire morning day of. She ended up not getting any makeup done cause she wouldn't stop scream-sobbing and refused to get dressed, stalling the wedding /35 minutes. She then said 45 minutes of vows that she had prepared, 9 pages of things like inappropriate vows to friends and family, his parents and sisters, none of them her husband, and then almost didn't say I do. Managed to get a, yeah okay yeah I do out of her almost a full 60 seconds after she was supposed to say anything. I could go on for hours, but it was the most painful and awkward wedding I've ever been to. I've got my money on 10 months. We're 1 month in. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her stepbrother. No one saw that coming. It wasn't at a wedding, but it was the first time I really sat down to talk to the couple. They came to town about a year after the wedding, and my wife, cousin to the groom, and I met them for drinks at one of the cool parts of Cool City. One of the first topics of conversation was what we knew about the lifestyle scene, a word which in this case means swinger. Afterward, I pointed out to my wife that the bride seemed to have been rather openly and boldly flirting with her. My wife shrugged it off because I'm often pretty terrible at that kind of thing. We met one more time, this time for a funeral. After the ceremony, we were hanging out in a hotel room drinking. The bride again seemed to be pretty openly flirting with my wife, and this time was going out of her way to show off her talent for bedroom knots. Again, the groom is there in the room. I pointed out all of this again, and this time my wife tacitly agreed. The two would divorce soon after. The bride, it seems, only discovered or accepted that she was a lesbian after she'd gotten married. Not a wedding moment as much as a bachelor party moment, but my ex got married to a woman 2 years ago from a super conservative religious family. We were still friends for the most part, and I was surprised he asked me to be a groomsman, but I figured, hey, always good to be able to stay friends with your exes. That feels like mature growth and closure. He got really drunk at the bachelor party, and at one point asked me if I ever had any regrets about us breaking up. And I said I had loved him, but no, we had made the right decision in the long run. And then he told me that he sometimes wishes that we were getting married the next week, and how his fiancé's family will never accept him. And then after an awkward pause he said, what if we just run away together? Laughed it off as a joke and said we should rejoin the group. Then he said it again later again in a joke tone. And then a third time later in the night. We had been friends for years but only dated for like 6 months. Turns out he asked the same thing to another one of his exes who wasn't a groomsman but was attending the wedding. The couple is still together technically but separated. The bride was caught being tag-teamed like 2 hours after the ceremony. The writing was already on the wall. It was mine. Ex-wife had a taste for theatrics and wanted a choreographed dance number for the first dance. Wanted the whole wedding party involved, but there was no interest. I'd never danced, not even at a club, but was willing to take lessons with her with the understanding we would do something together so she could have her dream wedding. I sucked but got through a few lessons of slow dancing. I can now awkwardly shuffle around, but don't expect anything crazy. The dance school wouldn't choreograph anything for us, so she promptly gave up. When it came to choosing the song, she decided she wanted I Want You to by Weezer, my favorite band, and the song had just come out recently, which has like a jamboree feel to it. It is not a slow song to slow dance to. I suggested we choose something else, but she insisted we would just slow dance to it. I made her promise she wouldn't change her mind. Sure enough, 30 seconds into the song she backs up and starts dancing a jig. I just stood there in disbelief fuming while she kept shouting and motioning for me to dance in front of all our guests. To boot, we had set a budget, she exceeded it, then her parents decided to chip in $5,000. And rather than use it to offset what we were over budget, she decided to spend more. In retrospect, that should have been a huge clue that she didn't respect me at all. Cheated on me and ran off with some guy like a year later. Got remarried before we were legally divorced. Her parents never did hand over the $5,000, because they put a provision on it that we had to go up north for a weekend and take some stupid Christian financial planning course their friend ran. My ex was also an atheist and didn't want to do that, but knowingly spent the money we didn't actually have. FFS. I've got two. One of my good friends got married and I'd never met her before the wedding because she's just shy. On the wedding day, she was belligerently drunk before the ceremony even started and couldn't even get through the line she was supposed to repeat. I promise to love you. She ended up slapping the groom, spilling champagne on her dress, and then crying under a table while he tried to comfort her. They lasted about 4 months. Another one was my wife's friend. She's a very conservative, religious white girl who married a black man. Most of her racist family didn't approve of the marriage and didn't show up, but she planned the whole marriage around race. Like a vanilla cake for her and a chocolate cake for him, the wedding colors were black and white, and even the meals were white meat for her side and dark meat for his. It was extremely uncomfortable as a guest. They lasted 2 years, but broke up because he was abusive and almost killed her, rather than the weird racial tension. The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also, it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. Took her 3 years to run away. Not at the wedding itself, but I used to work at a David's bridal. Bride came in with tons of friends, we did the say yes to the dress thing, and an hour later she's standing there in $3,000 worth of stuff and doesn't have any money with her or in her account. She decides she wants to apply for the store credit card. I run it through the system, and she gets denied. She then calls the groom for his info, which to be fair, people did all the time, and he tells her no. She threw a huge fit on the phone with him, standing on the bridal stage, literally demanding why not? Why? Why? Like an actual child over and over again. I've never seen a 30-year-old age backwards so quickly. She was just a brat, literally stomping her feet in front of me, all her friends, and the other bride in the store. I was embarrassed. At the end of all of that, she hangs up on him and her friend is like, "I'm so sorry you can't get your dress." And the bride stops crying instantly and just goes, "Oh, I'll get the dress. I just have to do this at home, and when he gets mad enough he'll come get it for me, so I'll stop." Speechless. Sure enough, girl came back 2 days later with her man and he applied for the credit card and bought the dress. He was livid and silent and she was smug as hell. Can't imagine they're having a happy marriage if they are still together. During the cake ceremony, the bride rather forcefully shoved a piece of cake into the groom's face. It seemed to be done with a little too much anger and not enough good humor. You could tell the groom was not happy. They were divorced a year later. The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out and telling him to treat marriage differently. The new husband grabbed my ass. Wife was apparently also cheating. Divorced a few months lately. They later cheated on their new partners with each other. Groom slept with another groomsman the night before he married his wife. Wanted to go to a gay bar at the bachelor party. Came out 2 years into the marriage. Denial ain't just a river in Egypt. Lesbian couple married at a church. Fuckhead dad had to be locked out for threatening the life of his daughter's fiancé. 8 months later, fuckhead dad murdered daughter's fiancé. I knew that sick fuck was going to try and break them apart. That was my thinking at my own wedding. I had no control over it, it was all his family. Had the reception at the local fairgrounds. Fried chicken and corn on the cob for the meal. Husband chewed me out that there would be no music and absolutely no dancing because he refused to dance. Ansel ordered 6 cases of cheap champagne and got pissed when no one would drink it, including me. They literally could not give it away. The after party, as the reception was like 2 hours for lunch, was at the MAL's. The husband promised as a wedding gift that he was officially done smoking. He had his entire family form a circle around him so he could quickly try to smoke a whole pack, blocked from my view. I had a friend pick me up and I left. There are significantly more WTF moments before and after, but we lasted 2 months. The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said "for richer," left out the poorer. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the "for richer or poorer" part and she said, "for richer or richer, and maybe for poorer." The officiant was not pleased. I think they made it a year. I worked at a museum that also doubled as a wedding venue in the summers. As part of the wedding package, the museum would stay open after hours for the guests only, so I just sit there and greet people basically. One wedding got particularly rowdy. Almost everyone was drunk, people were jumping into the fountain, someone vomited in said fountain. At one point the bride is crying. Turns out the groom and one of his groomsmen were screwing upstairs in one of the bathrooms. A fight ensued between the groom and the father of the bride and cops were called because it really got ugly. Entertaining for me, but I felt so bad for the bride. When my sister married her first husband, she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, "I can make this work, right?" They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement a year prior. This would be the wedding of my own parents. They had been divorced for many years but told us, the kids and their spouses, they were planning to get remarried, and would we like to go with them to Las Vegas to witness this event. We were all still in our 20s, so we thought hell yeah. Flash forward to 2 days into the weekend, and there has been no word of a wedding. The kids all had a conversation. What should we do? Should we ask about it? That should have been our first clue that it wasn't a good idea for them to get married. But lack of perspective made us oblivious to the obvious. So we pressured them. Hey, You told us you were going to get remarried, when are you going to do it? Anyway, then we suddenly found ourselves in a courtroom speaking to the judge. He was wise and asked to speak privately to my parents, and I am sure asked them, "Why are you doing this, are you sure?" Well, I guess they gave him the correct answers because he did it. Long story short, they ended up divorcing again. Not long afterwards. He got so fucked up at the reception he had a fist fight with her cousin in the toilets over coke. He told all the other cousins to fuck off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15/16, and he forgot to bring his child to the hotel. When I was getting ready and the whole time I had a pit in my stomach. Everyone told me it's just nerves and totally normal. Truth is, I didn't want to do it but felt like I couldn't back out at the last minute. We got hitched and that's when the abuse went from stinging comments to full throttle. We lasted 4 years before I worked up the courage to end it. Listen to your gut. Not at the wedding but how the couple met. My 40-year-old cousin met his 18-year-old wife when she was dating his 17-year-old nephew. They started an affair, she left the nephew and married the uncle. They got divorced 2 months later when she had an affair with a third guy. Not quite a wedding moment, but I had one at a dinner my ex-wife and I had with some newlywed friends of hers. It was 10 days after their wedding and we all went out to dinner at a local restaurant that had a psychic act that played in their bar. My ex-wife and her friend wanted to get their palms or tea leaves or whatever read, while the two ladies were with the psychic 10 days after the wedding, 3 days after returning from the honeymoon. The creep suggested we plan to go whoring in Vancouver, BC, since prostitution had recently been decriminalized there, and it was only a few hours' drive. I declined. I also told my ex-wife, who eventually told her friend, who was a paralegal who divorced her husband within 18 months, and that's how karma paid for all the document prep for my amicable divorce. Cousin's wedding when her mother and the groom's mother went outside to argue about how the bride's side was not at their assigned seats. They took over the groom's side. Marriage lasted less than 6 months. The morning after the wedding at campfire coffee, the new bride turned to the groom asked, "Are you going to wear your ring every day because it kinda makes you look like a fot?" Those of us there side glanced and took deep sips of coffee. I think it lasted 4 to 6 months. I was a deputy sheriff taking an in-custody defendant to his court date. Turns out it was his wedding appointment. When the judge asked if there was anyone who objected, the assistant DA in the back stood up and proceeded to blow my mind. The groom had a pending domestic violence case later that day where the bride was also the victim. The man was well known as abusive. On the last call, he has held a knife to the bride's throat before being taken into custody. They were getting married, so the bride could not be compelled to testify against the groom. The entire courtroom went dead silent until the judge spoke. "Well, who am I to stand in the way of love?" And with that he banged his gavel. They were married. The ADA's case fell apart. He was released that day, and back in jail by the next week. I'll let you guess what he was arrested for. Asterisk. I saw a bride's father say this during his wedding speech to his daughter. "I got this one, next one's on you." Years ago I got a wedding invitation that said to please cover your plate by giving at least $200 as a wedding gift. We didn't go, but that couple was divorced in 2 years. My wife and I were both in the wedding party, for a friend of mine found out from her the bride was talking to guys on a dating app while she was getting ready the morning of the wedding. Also during the ceremony, more than one family member could be heard saying it won't last and what a mistake it was. Met at the groom's house on our way to the bachelor party. We gathered around for a shot and his toast verbatim was, "To my future ex-wife." We all looked at each other awkwardly for a moment, but ultimately didn't think much of it and had a great night. Turned out he was already cheating on her, ended up having a kid with the other woman, and get divorced when she found out. He is obviously no longer a friend. When the groom said, "I will," when asked if he'd take the bride, the bride said, "I do." It should be noted the groom was on his third wife. The bride was the other woman in his last marriage. Surprisingly, infidelity is not what caused the divorce, it was infertility. My mom forgot to take off her ex-husband's wedding ring. My own marriage. Had one person at the wedding telling me I was making a huge mistake. Didn't believe it until I overheard my now ex-husband and his best friend talking about how hot a female guest was. How she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever laid eyes on. Not me. Humbling. The after-wedding dinner, my aunt's husband only referred to her as bitch. Went as a +1 to an engagement party. I asked the lucky couple when they were planning to get married. They looked at me like I was insane and told me they weren't planning to get married, they were just getting engaged. Some confusion there. 2 months later I went as a +1 to the girls' next engagement. I didn't bother to ask if they were getting married. My foster parents got married, but on the honeymoon the bride moaned another man's name. It was his friend Kenneth, who was X2 older than her. After he died I had to switch families, but I heard she's dating him now. The groom showed up to his own reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign style stick figures depicting a bride and groom captioned, "Game over." Not technically at the wedding, but on the way back my ex-wife said she wished we hadn't got married. That was my first clue, ha. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 of her exes were in the attendance. 3 of them had no date. I understand being in good terms, but Jesus, do you really invite all of them at your wedding? Funnily enough, it lasted 5 months. Well, making his speech, the best man said, "We all know how's easy bride's name is. I can name at least 7 guys here she has fucked. But to be fair, it's not like you are much better. Lest we forget you fucked my wife a few weeks ago." It was an Appalachian wedding in West Virginia. At the reception, there was a dude in the bathroom looking super depressed. He told literally anyone who asked that he was sad because the night before the wedding, the bride told him that was the last time they would fuck. People were super drunk by then, so it was a fight. Ever see those fights on Jerry Springer where everyone's fighting and Steve can't even hope to break it up? That's what it looked like. Next morning, everyone goes to breakfast together at Bob Evans, because of course they did. Bride and groom are there. After a bit of awkward small talk followed by silence, someone's like, "So, are you getting divorced?" Or, they said they decided to stay together, since she technically didn't cheat on him. She proceeded to cheat on him in the most spectacular ways. She literally auctioned herself off in a BDSM slave auction thing a couple years later. When my phone alarm went off precisely at the moment we were asked if anyone should oppose the wedding. Clearly, someone knew something about the ill-fated relationship I had gotten myself into. Sadly, the groom asked me, his best man, to give him one last blowjob before the wedding for old time's sake. I was invited to a high school friend's wedding. The night before the wedding, she asked me to join her future husband's bachelor party. He had no friends and it was only he, his brother, his father, and I. They were not thrilled with my presence. They wanted to go to a strip club but thought I would rat them out. We to a bar, but I could tell I was the turd in the punch bowl, so I went back to the hotel and they went to a strip club. My friend called me after I got back to the hotel. She asked me why I didn't go to the strip club and I told her that it wasn't my thing. She asked if we could hang out and catch up. I said sure, and she came to my room only wearing a robe. It was obvious there was nothing on under it. We watched a movie and she fell asleep. At some point in the night she left. The next morning at the wedding I was sitting next to a mutual friend. This friend was encouraging me to object and looked disappointed when I didn't do it. They lasted 5 years but lived together less than 2. This is a friend story, so take it with a grain of salt, but nevertheless. Groom got up during speeches and played an elaborate game of getting everyone to stand up and progressively sit down after. When he was done, a handful of guys were still standing. Groom goes, "All of these men have slept with my wife since we got engaged." Dropped the mic and left. I used to work at a pretty shitty privately owned exotic animal facility. Think like Joe Exotic but less meth. People often booked kids' birthday parties, etc. One time we hosted a wedding reception. The theme was hot fucking pink, so the clowns we normally hire were better dressed than them. The women looked like she wanted to cry the entire time. Not happy tears, LMAO. I felt bad for her. I feel like the groom just wanted to book the cheapest venue with AC, and they happen to like animals. If you like animals, you wouldn't support where I worked. Edited for typos SMH. The groom left for 2 hours in the middle of the reception to run a live fantasy football draft. They're divorced now.